in this spot right here. Down in Florida, we went to a little church called Colonial Baptist, and Wednesday night the pastor got up, and they had a prayer list about as long as your arm, and he went through every name. For 30 minutes, he went through every name. I thought, wow, he's not going to preach. No, no. He preached. For 45 minutes he preached. Then he said, all right, now don't y'all forget tonight, we've got a wedding Saturday, so let's get busy. And about 30 vacuum cleaners came out. Everybody hit that floor with a vacuum cleaner. They had their own vacuum cleaners stored in the back, and they started vacuuming down every row. I got a picture. It was men up there vacuuming, women vacuuming. It was something to see. All right, let's get started. We're still in Hebrews. We're struggling to get through, I guess you might say, through Hebrews. These 26 weeks I said would be, or turned into about 50-something. But we're all the way over to one of my favorite characters. If you look at verse 22 of Hebrews 11, we're about to venture into actually one of my very, very, very favorite characters, biblical characters, and that's Joseph. In verse 22, it just says, by faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. It amazes me that this man got one verse. He got one verse, but it said, by faith Joseph. Obviously, he was a very faithful man. Obviously, he trusted God through everything he went through. And y'all pretty much, if you've studied Joseph, you know his life and what he went through. And we're going to cap off some of that a little bit tonight as a way of introduction. Joseph is a unique character, and I love him. He's what we ought to want to be. He's the kind of Christian we ought to want to be. He lived his life straight down the line with God. He trusted God for everything. Didn't matter whether he was in prison, whether he was in a pit, whether he was in Potiphar's house, whether he was in the palace. It didn't matter where he was. He just trusted God. He had the faith in God to live by faith in God. We need to do that. We need to live that way. We're so wishy-washy. We're so up and down. One minute we're high, next minute we're low on God. We need to go understand that God's in control of everything, y'all. Doesn't matter what it is. I think at times, Miss Alice, this world's out of control. No, it ain't. God knows exactly what's going on. And he knows he's in control, and he'll take control one day, and we'll be there with him. Okay, so let's look at Joseph's life. Let's start with his home life. His mother, y'all know his mother was Rachel. His father was Jacob. He had an aunt named Leah. He had a grandfather named Laban. He had a multitude probably of uncles. I don't know how many. He had several uncles. He had 11 brothers, but 10 that hated him. He had a sister named Dinah, and of course he had an uncle named Esau. You have and you'll make a lot of choices in life, but among life's greatest mystery is the one that surrounds the choice or the choosing of the family in which you're born into. One thing is for sure, you did not have a choosing there. You did not have a choosing. No one was able to ask, will I be born red, yellow, black, or white? No one was able to ask, would I be born into a Christian home or a communist home or maybe a pagan home? About the same thing. No one's asked. Okay, you didn't get the opportunity to ask, was born into a happy home or a home full of strife. You didn't get to ask, would I be born into a rich man's mansion or a beggar's shack. You didn't get to ask, would I be born in the United States of America or in India or in Russia or in Ethiopia. You didn't get to ask, I'd be born in this century or some other century. You didn't get to ask, I'd be born gifted or retarded or healthy or sick or male or female. The only person who did have a say about their circumstances of how they'd be born and where they'd be born was Jesus. There are so many mysteries about the pre-incarnate choices he did make as those are about the choices we didn't get to make. Okay, we wonder why was I born into this home and not that home. We take them back to our answers to be in God Himself. God is too wise to make any mistakes. There had to be good reasons for the choices He made for you and I. The home into which Joseph was born provides us some clues. Many people consider themselves to be underprivileged in the matter of their birth and their background. Perhaps they are. Perhaps they are. What is important, however, is how they react to those circumstances that are beyond their control. And let me add, many others that will come our way, those circumstances that are out of our control. You have them all the time. Many of the lives, it's all sovereign choices, y'all. Chosen by God Himself. Joseph was privileged. He was gifted. I think he was probably a nice-looking young man. He was born into a chosen family. He was loved very tenderly by his mother and devoutly loved by his father. For those things, he was detested. He was hated by almost everyone else. It's nothing short of a miracle that Joseph ever survived boyhood or his youth. He was probably around 17 years old when his mother passed away. He had 10 older brothers, all of whom hated him. They hated the sight of him. When they saw him coming that day, right before they put him in that pit, they saw him coming, they hated him. They hated the sight of him. They wished him dead, and actually again, they came close to murdering him. We know much about Joseph's family life and his family, especially about the members of his family. What did Joseph learn? What did Joseph learn about life from them? I think he learned a lot from them. I think that's how he was able to stand in Egypt, how he was able to get through the pit, how he was able to get through Potiphar's, how he was able to get through the prison and become prime minister one day. See, the children of this large family were not born over 20 or 25 years, as you might think. They were much the same age. See, Jacob, their father, had 4 wives. And there was fierce competition among those wives. They had one ambition, consuming ambition, present their husband with sons. And as a result, Jacob's children almost treaded on each other's heels to scramble out into the world. Joseph's oldest brother Reuben couldn't have probably been much more than 6 years older than him. So let's look into the home, and as we introduce Joseph to you. Joseph's mother, Rachel must have been a beautiful woman, much more physically attractive than her older sister, Leah. Jacob fell for Rachel at first sight. From then on, all his eyes were on, they were on nobody and nothing else but her. Jacob first met her. He met Rachel at the local well, not the local bar. Okay? She had come to draw water for her father's sheep. By the time they had been in Uncle Laban's home for just a short while, Jacob was sure that he wanted to marry his cousin Rachel. He loved her so much, he served 7 years. 7 years for her. Then he served another 7 years for her. Y'all know the story. Jacob only disappointment with Rachel was that she could not give him children. This lasted for a number of years. And when at last she did present him with a child, he was full of joy for it. He called his name Joseph. And he loved him above all the other children he had. Indeed, that devotion to that boy was noted by others. And again, that caused a problem. Joseph learned one great lesson from his mother, and that was patience. She had learned how to wait. She waited for him, for Jacob, for 14 years. She waited to have a child for many years. Again, we're talking about a young girl who's very attractive and who probably has a desire to get married. Joseph was just a little boy. Jacob kept promising to move. He never did. He was too involved and loved money too much. We can be sure that that lesson kept Joseph in good standing in the dark and terrible years waiting in the prisons, abandoned, forgotten in prison in Egypt. That just, hey, you're going to stick right here. You're going to stick right here. My dad was offered a job at SEAL Test. Brother Roy worked with him. He offered a job at SEAL Test. He wouldn't leave Mr. Green. He wouldn't leave the Red Rose Dairy for nothing. He kept telling Mama he could make more money, but he's going to stay right there. She didn't understand that statement. We didn't need it probably. But I don't blame him. He was loyal to it. He had to leave after a bad wreck at 50 years old. He'd only been with Mr. Green for 35 years at that time, which means probably he started work there when he was 15 years old. Rachel dies when Joseph again is about 17 years old. And just about the time now that finally Jacob has decided the family's going to move to the Promised Land. Jacob buried his beloved Rachel on the Bethlehem Road, about 2 miles south of Jerusalem. Joseph, as well as his dad, was brokenhearted. Mom had passed away. Moreover, life became much more dangerous for Joseph. He now faced the hatred of these brothers. See, as long as Rachel was alive, Brother Randy, as long as she was alive, they wouldn't dare touch him. It would have been like, grabbing a cub from a mama bear. She would have tore into him. But now, she's dead, and the hatred is fueled. It's fueled. His daddy Jacob. Hey, his father knew God. He found him. He met God in Bethel, the house of God. For years, however, he lived a carnal and worldly life. We're going to get into that very subject Sunday morning. There's a whole lot of carnal Christians. Carnal Christians. When Joseph was born, Jacob had been again, felt stirred by the Spirit of God in his soul. If you go back to Genesis in chapter number 30 and verse 25, it says, and it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away that I may go unto mine own place and my country. He finally realized that that world was not his home. There was another country, his country. There was another place that gripped his soul like it did Abraham. Perhaps Jacob didn't want Joseph to be too exposed to Uncle Laban. Jacob had seen what that kind of influence had done to his other sons. See, you get around that stuff. See, we have this mentality. I had this mentality. When I got saved, I was going to save all my buddies, all my drinking buddies, all my rowdy friends, you might say. I was going to get them saved. So I'd just hang out with them some more. I'd just go hang out with them some more. No, that don't work. That didn't work at all. They tried to influence me. I'd be drinking a Coca-Cola and they've been drinking beer. But that didn't influence them. That didn't impress them at all. Their whole goal was to bring me back in. They wanted to bring me back into it. That's what's happening here with Laban and these boys. They're influenced by him. It's not a good influence. Jacob had seen that. So he's going to try to get out, but again, Laban was pretty crafty, old fox. He was pretty clever, a lot more clever than younger Jacob. He knew how to bait the hook for Jacob. Money. He just upped the ante. He just raised his pay, and again Jacob fell for it. But as a result, Jacob made a lot of money. And in the end, he earned himself some enemies, Laban and his sons, which was Joseph's uncles and Joseph's grandfather. It became too hot for him. He had to get out. No longer could he stay. He grabbed his flock and grabbed his family and took off to the promised land. That's when he had his encounter with God. And that permanently changed his life. Y'all know the story. He wrestled with God. Y'all know how he came out. See, until then, though, he had been a saved man, but he really wasn't a spiritual man. Now he's become a spiritual man, a saved spiritual man. There's a difference. See, there's the natural man, there's the spiritual man, and there's the carnal man. The carnal man's a danger. The natural man, you kind of know where he is. See, I have a philosophy. You keep your friends close, and you keep your enemies, or those potential enemies, a lot closer. Keep them a lot closer to you. Okay? They're going to prove them what they are pretty soon. Okay? But we should remember that Joseph knew his father best in those better years after he found God. See, Joseph's still a young man at this point here. But as he's growing up and he's watching his father, he's seeing a man of God. He sees him growing in grace, and he sees him increasing in knowledge of God. See, that's what we ought to do, all of us ought to do as a father and a mother to our children. They ought to see us growing in God. We shouldn't find any reason to not be in church when the doors are open. Hey, you may be on vacation, but you can still find a church. We wound up finding a real good church, an excellent church. And I was glad we did. Because again, there's sometimes I've had to find a church and I'd pick out a Baptist church, and it really wasn't what I wanted to be around. So again, you can have that happen. See, the roots of living, lasting faith had gotten into the soul of Joseph by watching his father. He learned a lot. That helped him That helped him when he was in bondage in Egypt, I guarantee you. That was what helped keep him, his faith in God. That's what helped him trust God. And that'll help you, and that'll help me. If we'll just realize that God again is in control of everything. Joseph learned many lessons. And we could continue looking at the influences in his life. We could look at his aunt. Okay? But these things that he learned helped him when he was in Potiphar's house. And being the prime minister of Egypt, isn't it? Okay. I think he learned a lot of that from his aunt. I think he watched her as she struggled with her relationship with Jacob and how she handled herself. I think he saw things in Laban, his grandfather, that he said, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be that kind of person. I don't want to be that kind of man. I'm sure those uncles and I'm sure those brothers taught him some things. I can assure you they did. Again, I think he learned a lot. I'm sure he learned a lot from his encounter with his Uncle Esau. Y'all know that story. I think there he picked up on forgiveness. Full, freely, forever forgiveness. Which he needed when he was brought face to face with his brothers, and he said to them, God meant it unto good. He forgave them, and you think about that, they tried to kill him. Can you imagine that? And you just look them in the eye and say, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Everything's okay. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of your family. I'm going to take care of, okay. Could you do that? Could I do that? I don't know. I could if God let me. God would have to work through me. God would have to do it. That's where he was. Joe's a typology of God, y'all, of Jesus. He's straight as an arrow. But he was willing to forgive them. What a lesson we can learn from that. You see, God has a plan and a purpose for everybody's life. And that plan includes the circumstances under which you were born and where you were raised and where you live. I mean, I came from a poor family, but I came from a hard-working family. They weren't afraid of work. And people all the time, I run people all the time. I ran into one just yesterday. I took Sherry before she had that surgery to get something to eat. And it's a good thing I did, because she can't eat for a week now. But I ran this person, Westview, out of Westview. And they're always talking about, well, I didn't leave nothing back Westview. I didn't learn nothing. I learned a whole lot out of Westview. I learned that how to work hard. I learned that, hey, you don't have to give up. Joseph learned a lot from some of them pretty bad influences. But he took those bad influences and turned that around. He didn't say, I want to be like that. I don't want to be like Laban. I don't want to be like my granddaddy. I don't want to be like these brothers. I don't want to be like these uncles. I want to be more like my daddy. I want to be more like Jacob. And you say, well, people might say, well, but you don't know what my family's like. You don't know what kind of childhood I had to grow up in. You don't know how I was neglected or how I was abused or blah, 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 blah. Blame it on the parents. Blame it on your parents. That's the best way. Blame it on somebody else, okay? The things I saw in my household, the things I saw and my family members, a lot of it I want to get away from. And I did. And I did. Thanks to the Lord, I did. Hey, I may not know what you've gone through, but God does. God knows. See, God was working his master plan in you. He was engineering you for eternity, not for the time right now. Okay? Joseph lived in a hostile world, but nothing happened to him in his boyhood that was not necessary for his manhood. And the same with you and I, or your womanhood. He learned to hate evil because he's around so much evil. If you ever read about his family, you'll know what he went through. For that same reason, he learned to cherish and to cultivate goodness and to be kind. And his tears and his fears drove him into the arms of God. Joseph, the family into which he was born, was his school. It was a hard school. But he passed his exam one by one and graduated with high honors, okay? Not only for this world, but for the world to come. God expects us to do the very same thing. He expects you and I to do the very same thing. He doesn't expect us to stay in the muddy grubs and whine and moan all the time about what we came out of or what we even into, the circumstance we're even into right now. You may be going through something. I don't know. You may be going through something. But God's in it with you. He's in it with you. He's designed it for a purpose for you. It's a school. It's a lesson to be learned. And how you handle that lesson, how you handle that circumstance is so vitally important. So we're going to stop here. I just want to kind of introduce you to Joseph. Next week we're going to look at Joseph's adversity. He had it. He was in a pit. He was in a pagan land. Hey, he was in prison. He went through a lot. We won't do it next week. Week after next. Excuse me. Next week we got the tent meeting. Don't y'all forget about the tent meeting. Starts Monday night, 7 o'clock. Probably need to get there a little early. They're going to feed everybody. Every night we're going to feed. We got Tuesday night. We're going to feed. But again, every night they're going to feed you probably around 6 o'clock, maybe around 6 o'clock, maybe a little before. I don't know yet. Again, Monday through Friday. Local preachers. We got local preachers around coming, just like we did last year. And it'd be a great time for a revival. It'd be a good time to have a revival. The tent meeting would be a wonderful thing to see people saved. See people come, hey, maybe backslidden folk get back to God. Whatever. Maybe people who's going through some tough times. So let's go and we'll get to our prayer list now, though. And